Spiral: Murder, Madness, Meditation. A memoir by R. Troy Bridges. Read by Robbie Porter. From the first day, convinced that I could escape and ignoring the consequences, I examined every inch of the third-floor jail, trying to find a way out and failing time and again. First, I carefully made a key for the back door out of a folded aluminum tobacco can, but the key bent and wouldn't turn in the lock. Next, I tried to dig through a foot-thick concrete ceiling using only a large metal spoon, but gave up after a week. Then one day, while sitting on the toilet, I noticed that the back wall of my cell, made of quarter-inch steel, was rusted in several places, exposing tiny holes the size of BBs. I quickly grabbed my large spoon and, using the handle, enlarged one of the holes to the size of a penny. The next day I rented the use of a pipe wrench from a trustee in exchange for $20. Working at the wall for hours, I used the wrench to rip out an L-shaped area large enough for me to crawl into the pipe chase behind my cell. That night, I crawled through the hole into the pipe chase and from there was able to get to the catwalk and windows to outside. After twisting out the window frame with a pipe wrench, I tied several sheets together to make a rope and climbed out the third-story window to the parking area below. Crossing the nearby highway, I reached the levee and headed north. Jogging, I quickly developed blisters and soon threw my shoes away, which I regretted later when I ran into large patches of stickers. I made 8 or 9 miles before daylight. Then, certain that men with dogs would be out searching for me at first light, I started looking for a place to hide until dark. Seeing a large bush near a small pond, I walked closer to investigate. After months of nothing but gray walls, dirty concrete, and steel bars, I stood at the edge of the marsh pond and truly appreciated the red, orange, and violet sky of early morning, and the nearby cattails gently waving in the breeze, and, 30 yards away, a blue heron perched on one leg fishing for breakfast. It was fascinating and achingly beautiful. I heard a dog bark and dropped into a crouch. Trembling, I crawled inside the large bush and looked around to see 2 deputies with a dog on a leash, walking behind a slow-moving pickup truck. I burrowed deeper inside the bush, closed my eyes, and prayed. After the deputies passed, I slept away the entire day, emerging at dusk to continue on stiff legs and tender feet my trek north to New Orleans. I was hungry and covered in mud and mosquito bites, but mostly I was thirsty. I needed fresh water, but was afraid to get too close to the Mississippi River because of all the people living along its banks. So I continued to hobble along the base of the levee. Eventually I came across a mud puddle, 3 feet by 2 feet, and stopped. The water in the center was crystal clear, although around the edges it was cloudy and muddy. I straddled the puddle and bent until my face was an inch from the center. Careful not to stir the water on the bottom, I gently slurped the sweet rainwater until satisfied. Refreshed, I continued north, walking again until first light, then stopping to fashion a hideout in the tall grass. But after a few hours of tossing and turning and battling mosquitoes, I grew impatient and left my hideout. It was early afternoon, the sun hot and bright, and there was almost no traffic on the lone highway, so I took a chance and started walking. A couple hours later, exhausted, I sat down on an old railroad tie to rest, and had been there only a few minutes when I heard, "Don't move. Don't even think about it." Slowly I turned my head, despite the warning, and 2 feet behind me stood 2 sheriff deputies, both holding shotguns. Covered in mud, stinking of swamp, red welts covering my shirtless torso, barefoot and hobbling in leg irons, the sheriff proudly paraded me past the other prisoners, including the trustee that had rented me the pipe wrench, to show them the end result should they try to escape themselves. I was locked in a padded cell. The walls were covered in heavy pads, and the floor, except for a hole in the center, was covered with a black rubber mat. Exhausted, I slept as soundly as if in a hotel. It seemed as if the sheriff and I shared a sense of the dramatic as well as the practical. The next morning, he showed up outside my cell with 2 trustees and a portable welding machine. He welded the door shut. It's strange, but I actually felt a sense of pride in knowing that the sheriff thought I was so dangerous that he needed to seal me inside the cell like a wild but clever animal. 6 weeks later, the welds sealing the door were cut, and that afternoon I was moved back to the general population. A couple of weeks later, after listening to the advice of my court-appointed lawyer, I pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 5 years for burglary and 3 years for escape. 2 weeks later, I was sent to the state penitentiary at Angola.